Thank you for that wonderful recap of Salesforce platform and the wonderful session you gave.
Thank you, Subash.
So, welcome everyone for this Salesforce for Developers session. Hopefully, many of you are having a pleasant morning, and some in the Europe might have been maybe having that wonderful evening. And hope everyone is very safe and trying to be safe in this difficult situation. With praise for everyone to be safe, let me start my session. And at the very first, let me tell that this is my first webinar, though I have been working in Salesforce for around 10 years. So my name is Subash Kumar. I'm working for Softsquare from 2004, and after having some bit and piece developments in .NET, Java, PHP, and all, put a strong pedal on Salesforce, and that journey continues. Thank you, Softsquare, for giving me this opportunity. So as always, this is the forward-looking statement for any session of Salesforce. So Salesforce is upgrading its versions thrice in a year. So they have 3 releases. So anything can happen. So something which may be missing in this session, Salesforce will bring it in the next release. So let's start with what's Apex. So I believe most of the people present here have some or other development experience. So at the moment, I am not going much deep into Salesforce or the programming techniques. I am going to cover what is there in Salesforce which can attract people working in other platforms. So it's hopefully it will be a pleasant journey. What is Apex? So it's a very proprietary programming language for Force.com. If you want to run an Apex code, you should have a Salesforce org. Without having a Salesforce org, you cannot run Apex. It is running in a cloud platform, as you know, and it uses very much similar syntax like Java. So people working in Java or have experience in Java or PHP or C, they may find programming in Apex fascinating. And Salesforce Apex is a 100% object-oriented program. So there are no primitive data types, simplifying the primitive data types or so. Everything is class and object. It's strongly typed. You will have, as you know, every variables or methods, everything should be declared. Their data types should be declared at first. Without having with a loose data type, you cannot work in Apex. And the most fascinating thing about Apex programming or Salesforce, multi-tenant aware. So in our college days, while we were studying C or C++, the most frightening topic was the pointer for me. So if I know how to escape all those difficulties in pointers, then I know C programming like that. Apex syntax and other notations may look like Java or other similar programming languages. This escaping the governor limits is the biggest challenge in Apex programming. So any good programmer should be aware of all the governor limits. Why governor limits? So that is why it says multi-tenant aware. Salesforce follows multi-tenant architecture. It cannot use its resources if one transactional code holds a resource for a long time. So what happens if an infinite loop runs? So when we are doing some programming in our own languages, the system may hang. We may have to close the browser and come back. At times you will have to reboot the system. As Salesforce is multi-tenant, follows multi-tenant architecture, if the resource is found to be held by a single transaction for a long time, or it uses or it fetches too much data from database, blocking all the memory space, what Salesforce will do is it will just throw an exception and stop that transaction. This exception cannot be reverted. So that is the biggest challenge. So this multi-tenant aware, it knows how and how the programmers or the program is using the resources, and if something is found to be violating, it will terminate the code. So that is the biggest challenging and the fascinating thing to work with Salesforce. You will know how to do best programming. You should follow all the best practices, otherwise your code will not succeed. Next one is the integrated. It's integrated with database. So in Salesforce, all the database is built within its platform. There is no external Salesforce connected. Of course, there are exceptions. There are external objects, but for its purpose, all the basic data, the standard objects are built in Salesforce itself. Otherwise, we can create our own data models. Those objects we can create in Salesforce itself, and the Apex code will simply and very easily connect with the database. There are no connectors needed. So you just write a code, it will connect to the database and give you the data. And the transactional access to the database. So like you programmers may be aware of, in every DBMS operations or database operations, there will be a final commit or rollback. In Salesforce Apex also, we can complete, we can either follow all or none process. Maybe we can go for partial saving, partial committing of database, or if everything happens good, it will complete all the transactions on a happy note. So that is called transactional access to database. So these are the features of Salesforce Apex. And when should we use Apex, or why should we use Apex? When should we use Apex? Strictly, very strictly, go for Apex code if you are unable to perform some operations using the configurable and the point and click tools. Just before my session, Nixon told about lots of point and click features in Salesforce, like the validation rules, the workflow rules, the process builder, flows. All this doesn't require programming language, or at least very minimal programming language. These are out of the box features available in Salesforce. Only if you think you cannot achieve something through configuration, only then go to Apex code. Otherwise, don't think about Apex code at all. So if you look at the next bullet points, complex data validations. So we have validation rule configurable feature. We can use that to that validation in configuration for lots of writing lots of validation rules. But there are scenarios where the validation should go across multiple objects or follow very complex rules which you cannot achieve through configuration. At this instance, go for Apex validations. Same thing with the field updates. So workflow and process builder can do field updates for you without writing a code, without writing any code. But if you are unable to achieve anything through that, go for the field updates. Same cross-object field updates. So using workflow rule, the cross-object field updates is limited. Using process builder, it's a bit enhanced version. If you are unable to do that, then go for code. Automatic record creations based on complex rules. Using workflow rule, you can create tasks. Using process builder, you can create objects. Again, if those are limited, if you think those are limited, go for Apex code. Same thing with the scheduled jobs. So in workflow rule and process builder, you can schedule an action. So send an email X days from the created date or some date fields. That is also possible in process builder. You can schedule some actions. Go for code if that is complex. So that is the points which I covered in the previous slides are how we can extend from configuration. But there are other things which you cannot do in configuration at all. That is when we will have to code. Auto execute logic on DML. So in simpler terms, that is trigger. You may be aware of triggers. When a DML happens, when a record is created, inserted, created, updated, or deleted, you may have to do some process in the background. And workflow rules does that for insert and update to a limit. There is nothing with the delete there. So we will have to use the triggers. Add business logic to system events like button clicks. So in lots of buttons for which you will have to write code. So that is one thing. Act as a controller in UI development. In Salesforce, we have features like Visual Force, Lightning Component, Lightning Web Component. So all these UI components, they need to interact with the database, and at that time, Salesforce classes comes in as the controller. Asynchronous tasks. There are lots of asynchronous tasks. So a best example is end of the day reconciliation. So in banking or auditing purposes, we will be reconciling what is already done and make sure everything is in good position. We may have to do some integrations. We may have to fetch some data from an external system on a nightly basis. These are some examples of asynchronous tasks. Use Apex for these asynchronous tasks. So basically, this is a diagram of Salesforce that explains how Apex works. Developer develops the code, Apex compiler. So very initially, it compiles. Only if it is compiled, it will allow you to save in Salesforce server. Otherwise, if you are using any tools, you can save it locally, but only compiled codes will be going into the data storage. So the code is there. When end user requests, as always, in the client server architecture, it returns the compiled Apex. So what are the data types? It's very much similar to how Java is. So there are primitive data types, there are collections, there are enums. As you have programming knowledge, most of you might may be having programming knowledge, so you can easily understand this. The primitive data types: integer, long, double, decimal. So the difference is the double is 64-bit. Decimal we normally use for simple float-like values. String, date, time, and date time together. So there are 3 types for date-related fields. Boolean, ID. So Nixon explained that it's 18 character ID, and the 18 character is case insensitive, but there's a short form of that. It's 15 character ID. So you can use both of these. Any IDs will get you to the same record. So there is a specific data type called ID. So it will accept that 18 character or 15 character ID. So blob. Hopefully you are aware of blob. It is to use file-like structures. So the binary data is stored as blob data type. S object, an interesting one. Any object that is used to store data is called Salesforce object. So the examples are account, contact. These are standard objects. We have in our example, as Nixon showed, we have trip, vehicle. These are custom objects. These objects are used to store data. These are not just classes. These S objects are those objects that are used to store data. So you can declare a variable for an account object. Account S object or contact S object or vehicle S object or trip S object. These are called S object variables. When we go into the code, you will see them in action. So don't get confused much. Basically, it is storing a record. And like Java, object. This is the very base object. From object, all other data types are inherited. So these are the primitive data types in Apex. Then comes collections. So other programming languages have also collections. Salesforce Apex has very limited number of collections, just 3, and the programmer should be able to use these 3 collections in an efficient manner. So what are lists? So the 3 collections are list, set, and map. So list is very straightforward. It is an array. You can see it is accessed through index. So it will have a value. You can you can get an element from any position. It is not ordered. It can have duplicate values. The thing is, it should be of same data type. And if this collection or list is of type a primitive data type, it can be sorted. So the example I have given is an S object. So driver, in our example, we are going to see a driver object. So I am storing driver details, a list of driver details. So this is just like a driver ID and his name, age, and city or state. Next one is a set, very similar to list. The differences are, it doesn't allow duplicate values. It is not ordered. You cannot expect it to be in the same order you add items. So you cannot access it through index. You will have to loop through a set to retrieve any element. And on the other hand, you can check if an element is in the set or not. This set can contain any types of data. But a single set will contain a single type of data, but a set of strings, a set of S objects. So that is set. And the next one is map. Hopefully everyone is aware of this. It's a key value pair. A very much used. All these collections are very much used in Apex. Map should be handled very carefully because it's keys. If a string is used, it is case sensitive. So when using, mainly when using strings, you should be very careful. So it is also unordered, so you cannot expect it to be in the same order you put. The keys are very unique. You cannot add a duplicate key. If you try to add a second value with the same key, it will be overwritten. It won't throw any error. It will just be overwritten. And the values, they can be duplicates, but because the keys control them. And finally, when you look, when you combine this list, set, and map, the keys is a set and values is a list. You have methods to get the key set and all the values. They are provided in the maps. So when you look at the methods of map, you can get all these things. So here is an example. So I am using the drivers as the primary key of the map and the record itself as the value. Next one is it's enumerator. So if you are aware of Salesforce, it is like a restricted pick list. If you are a programmer, you may be coming up, you might have come across this in many other programming languages. It restricts you to use set of values. You will have a predefined set of values. Only they can be assigned for a particular variable. So this is called enumerator or in. So hopefully, I think we can go for a short break with these data types. Let's freshly start from these variables statements after a break. Shekhar?
Yeah, yes, Subhash. Shall we give 5 minutes break?
Yes, I want to give some live examples. So the first, through the first step, I just fast forwarded myself because they're mostly related to other programming too. That's why I'm going in went on in a fast mode. I will try to provide wherever we need examples, and maybe I can go it live, show some live examples if time allows. So let's move on to Apex statements. So like every program, let's start with the variables. So again, the variables in Salesforce are objects. So in our OOPS concepts, we have classes and objects, and every variable in Salesforce or Apex, in Apex is an object. So you cannot use those declarations like int or float, which you use in other programming languages. Here, everything is strictly object oriented. So any integer will be an object of integer class. And if you are not assigning any values, by default it is null, and you can initialize the variables when you declare them, like other languages. So you can see some of the examples here. There are some straightforward ones. Integer I. So this I is null now. There is a string, there is a decimal. So like other languages, you can declare multiple variables in one line if the data type is same, and some you can initialize, some you don't need to. There is a Boolean variable declared. The next two, maybe I'm not 100% sure how it is in other languages. This is a list and map. So if you see, I have declared a list of double, and the variable name is doubles. Here, list collection, any collection itself is an object. So here, doubles is an object. It has its own methods. Every list or set or map has its own methods, where and list is a class, map is a class, and set is a class. So doubles is an object of the list of doubles class. So that is the meaning here. I haven't assigned anything. They have constructors to assign values. I will come to them. So this is just, I want to show how to declare the variables. If you see map, I will have to define the type, map of what is a type of key and what is the type of the value. Here, ID, the record's ID will be used as the key, and the record itself, vehicle record will be used as the value. I'll surely show examples. So, and at the very end, if you see, there is S object account. So any, like I said in my previous session, any object that is used to store data belongs to S object, which you can declare as S object, or you can use that object name itself. Account AC, account A, contact C, vehicles V. You can use the API name of any S object and declare a variable that will be an object for that S object. Surely we'll show examples. Don't worry, I will stop here. these are operators which are very much Java-like, so I'm not going to explain these. This is for your review. The operators, there can be some exceptions here and there, but mostly the operators, operator precedence, how you use comments, the single line comment, multi-line comment, the constant using the final keyword, the if-else conditions, the ternary operators, the while loop, and traditional for loop. You know what a traditional for loop is, where we initialize with a variable, check the condition and increment. Of course, the break and continue to come out of the loops. So these are very much like other programming languages. So I think it's not necessary to touch it here. Only exception for break is in other languages, we use break to come out of a case statement. In Salesforce Apex, the switch case statement is a bit different. So the break will not be used in the switch case statement. So that is why I didn't include the switch case in this set. Now let's see this switch case statement. You can see the syntax. Looks pretty similar to our traditional switch cases. Here you see, instead of case, we will be using when. Instead of the final default, we are using when else. So these are some differences in the switch case statement. So it's self-understandable, but there are some more tricky parts here. One is, in the when part, you can use multiple values. So for example, switch on I when 1, 2, 3. If it is 1 or 2 or 3, if you want to perform the same operation, you can just use a comma separated values. The expression, it can be a method returning something. If it is a method returning an integer, you can use the method, you can call the method in the expression part. And if it returns an integer, you can take action based on what the method returns. The when else part, if value 1 or 2 or 3 doesn't match, it will come into the else part, when else part, and it is not at all mandatory. You can exclude the else part, and if it doesn't matches anything, it won't do anything. So that is something in this when else. And like I said earlier, there is no need of break statement to come out from each block. If you want against a null, you can use value as null. So when null, if the expression returns null value, what to do? The expression can be a method or enum. So I saw vehicle car type. So if it is a variable of type enum, you can use that expression in the enum and you can check against the values. And the final one, maybe I am not 100% sure if it is the time to come here. The last one allows implicit instance of checks and typecasting. So I will show an example for this for sure. What it does is, if an S object is returned, because the expression can return an S object. An S object can be an account or contact or opportunity, whatever it is. Based on the type of the account, if you want to do some actions, use the we can use the instance of check in the when value part. So do this action if it is an account, do this action if it is a contact. I'll show an example, but that's what it means. Yeah, this is something difficult from the other languages. Then comes the for statement. So I'm not touching the traditional for. There are other two forms of for in Apex. One of them you may be very well aware. It is to iterate through a collection. So from our three collections, list, set, and map, we can iterate through list or a list and set. If you want to iterate a map, we should use the key, the set of keys, and iterate through the map and get the values and what our process we have to do. So the syntax, you can see the syntax there. For a variable for the type of collection, if it is a string collection, use a string, a variable, then that list or set, and do whatever actions we want to do. So this is the one used for iteration. You can see the example. I am declaring, so I'm trying to cover the parts which I missed in when explaining the collections. I will try to cover in some of the examples. If you see the list, you can see a list of 4 strings. This is one constructor actually. This is a constructor for list class. You are assigning 4 literal values to a list of string. So this string, this list now contains 4 strings. This is a constructor. There are 3 types of constructors for these collections. So 3 or 4 types of constructors. It is type 1, assigning or initializing a collection with literal values. Now you see how I am iterating using a for loop. So this list is of type string. So the variable should be a type of string. Just I print what is in the list. So this will print Paula, Sandra, Harris, Yasif. Don't ask me where it will be printed. At the moment, we have something called debug log. In the back end, we use debug log to check the log statements. For this example, it will be printed in the debug statement. I will show again. I will show a live example for this. The next one is for to iterate through query results. So when I was preparing the slide, I was in a confusion of whether to go through SOQL first or go through collections because these are dependable. Finally, I decided to go with the statements and then go to SOQLs. So if you before going into SOQL, let me tell me what is SOQL. It's query language. When we query, we get results from any object that will be in the form of a list of that as object. We can use this for loop to iterate through the results we queried. And we can manipulate the values we receive. Then we can do DML operations. There are lots coming after this. The simplest example or the syntax for using for a query language is here. Variable, the query, this variable will be a variable of S object. You can see the example. For account, here account is an S object. So ACC is a variable that is going to hold each of the query results. Here is a query. You can see from this structure, it is a query. When you enclose a query within the square brackets, it is executed and returns a list of accounts. It can return other types also, but for this example, it will return if the org. I didn't include any conditions here. So if there are 100 accounts in this Salesforce org, it will return 100 accounts, and this loop will be executed for 100 times. And I'm checking a condition. If the contract end date for that account is less than today, then I am adding a contract ended at the end of the name. I have a small mistake here. In the if condition, I should have used the object name, acc.contract end date. So that's a mistake from my part. I will correct it. So if acc.contract end date less than system.today, If the contract has ended, basically change the name to account name hyphen contract ended. And at the end, you will have to do a DML operation. Only then it will be committed into the database. So this is just for an example of iterating through the query results. So these are basically the Apex statements. From now on, we will have to go into query and how to do with the queries, how to use these queries and the DML statements to build a complete Apex code. So next, let me go into SOQL. SOQL is basically Salesforce object query language. It is very equivalent to the SQL which we use for database. So Nixon showed you the similarity between a database and Salesforce objects. So we have we call the tables in Salesforce are S objects. The fields are fields themselves. The rows are called record here. So it's you can just envision a database table by an S object. So the single object SOQL. So in SQL, we can query just from one table. We can join multiple tables using left outer join, inner join, and we will put lots of conditions. For a simple or a single object query, it looks very much like a SQL, but for the joins, it is pretty different. You cannot do joins in SOQL if you don't have a relationship between the tables using the lookup or master detail fields. But in SQL, we can do, right? Even if there are no relationships explicitly defined, we can do an outer join or inner join using some common fields. Here you should define a relationship. So that relationship is defined using the lookup fields and the master detail fields. The next beauty of Salesforce is you cannot query all the fields using the star notation or the wildcard star notation. In SQL, if you put star for a table, it will bring data from all the fields. So this is one of the other multi-tenant awareness. So if we give the option of star for whether it is necessary or not, we will just put the star and pull every data. Here, as the wildcard character is not available, you query only the fields you need. That is very important. So if you need only 5 fields, specify all the 5 fields. If you need 25 fields, specify all the 25 fields. In SQL, we can use aliases for any fields, but in Salesforce, the alias is allowed only for aggregate queries, not for the normal SOQL. In the normal SOQL, you cannot use aliases. You should specify the field name itself. And we can query, we can limit the number of results returned. We can set an offset so that we can skip n number of records and start from the next set. So these are features in some other DBMSs. And of course, we have the group by, we have the filter, the where clauses. So they are all similar to the SQL. Then in the query, we cannot filter. In the where clause, we cannot use block or long text area fields. So long text area fields are those with more than 255 character limit, because when you create fields, there will be options: text field, text area, long text area, and rich text area. So text and long the text area you can use in filter, because text area itself has a limit of 255 characters, but long text area and rich text cannot be used in the filter of any query. And in the previous example, I showed how an SOQL returns a list of S objects. The most the usual way of returning results is list of S objects. The first one I have mentioned. Because as you can assume, a query result can have 0 records, 1 record, or more than 1 records. Most cases we will be getting more than 1 records. So that is a list of S objects. It can also return list of S objects. So that is when we use child relationships. I will come to relationship later. List of child operators. This is a multi-dimensional array, in other words. So in arrays we can have 1-dimensional and 2-dimensional arrays. This list of array is a multi-dimensional array. So one list will contain the results of parent record, and the next result and next array will contain the child results. So I will cover that in the next portion. So please be aware that it's a list that is returned. It can be a single dimensional array or 2-dimensional array, and it can return a single S object also. So if you are limiting the query and if you are 100% sure that a query will return only one result, it can be returned to an S object. And the next one is integer. So this integer is used only when you use the count function in a query. You can, if you want to count how many records are in an object or how many records satisfy a particular condition, then you will have to use this integer option. And another consideration is, if you are using a count function and use group, and if you are going to group, then this integer will not work. This is for non-grouped queries. So hope that gives some clarity of how integer works. A single S object, list of S objects, and list of S objects. Coming to examples. Relationship query. The most one of the more beautiful techniques in querying I have used. Like you know, or like Nixon mentioned, every object will have relationships. An object can have parents. So when there is a parent, obviously there will be child. A single object can have parent and child. Some objects will only have children. Some objects will only have parents. So you know what a relationship is. We can build using lookup or master detail. The field that exists is the child. Where it looks up is the parent. And that parent can have another parent. That grandparent can have another parent. So you know the hierarchy of how the data or the objects are built. We can use relationship query in SOQL, but not like our traditional way of joins. When we create a lookup or master detail field, the fields from the parent can be easily fetched using a dot notation. For example, if vehicle is a parent of trip, then that vehicle field is in the object, in the trip object, and you can access a field in vehicle using that vehicle field name dot that field name in the parent. And this relationship can go in a straight line. If you put a straight line from the root element, that is the object on which you write query, it can go up to 5 levels in a straight line. So child, parent, parents, parent, parents, parents, parent, parents, 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 parent, up to 5 levels. Remember, an object can have multiple lookup or master detail fields. So each of those can go up to 5 levels. In total, there can be 55 relationships. I'll try to bring an example for this. It's a bit hard to imagine and digest, but I will try to give an example in the next sessions. Similarly, if you want to query the children, you can use 20 child relationships. It's a limit. If you are querying vehicle and if you want to find how many trips a vehicle have gone for, here vehicle will be the parent, and you might have seen the data model. Vehicle will be the parent and all the trips will be children for the vehicles. You can easily query these child records. And in this scenario, it will be a list of list. So here are the SOQL examples. So the first one will look similar to a normal SQL. You won't have any parent or child relationship. In the example I have used a keyword like next n days. So there are lots of date literals provided by SOQL like tomorrow, yesterday, next n months. So this means next 30 days. So let's look from the very first example. Select ID, name, next trip date from vehicle, where certificate expiry date in next 30 days. So basically I want to find out all the vehicles whose certificate or fitness certificate we call that is going to expire in the next 30 days. And we want to find out if there are any trips, which is the very next trip assigned for that vehicle. So that is a very simple query. It doesn't look for any other objects. It just uses its own fields, the vehicle fields. The next one is a relationship query. See, I have used a parent relationship and child relationship. The very first line says ID name parent office _ r dot name. Here, ID and name are fields of vehicle object because we are building the query from the vehicle object. If we are not using any dot notation, it means this field belongs to the same object from which we query. So ID and name belongs to vehicle object. Look at the next field, parent office dot name. A vehicle is attached to an office because this tourister company has multiple offices and each office is maintained as an account in Salesforce. The relationship field is called parent office. If you remember the field naming convention, it will say parent _ office _ C. As we are using the field to get data from a parent, in order to denote the relationship, we use _ r. If we are just getting, if we just used the ID parent office _ C, what it will return is, it is a lookup field. it will return the ID of the parent office. We are trying to get the name of the parent office. So you can use any field in account object using that dot notation. So that is the way of fetching data from a parent. If you have a grandparent, keep on appending dots, dots, dots. So parent office and parent office owner, parent office owner's name. If you want to take the parent office owner's name, parent office underscore underscore r dot owner dot name. That means you are looking 2 levels up. You can go up to 5 levels. So I think that gives some clarity on getting data from the parent. So there will be only one parent for an object, means in a relationship there are if I confused you, if there are for one lookup or master data relationship, it will denote to only one record in the parent level. So you can use any fields from that parent record. However, a record can have multiple childs. So one vehicle might have been used in lots of trips. It can range from 0 to any number. Those children can be selected using the second line. See the second line. There we are selecting the fields from the child record. So that is part of the list we select. Select ID, name, pickup time from trips. Leave that underscore underscore r for now. You can include separate filters for that child records. So where greater than today. If you are unable to understand this, when you create an object and create a lookup or master detail relationship, I will show it later. When you create a lookup field or master detail field, it will ask you for a relationship name. If you try to create a lookup field on the wizard, mostly many people will ignore that because there will be a default value. That relationship name is important to query from the child records. It's not important for the parents. The field name is enough. I'll definitely show a child name or the relationship name. So for the time being, understand that there is a relationship name when you create a lookup or master detail relationship. Use that relationship name, and again, to denote it is a relationship or a custom relationship, use underscore underscore r. If they are standard relationships, this underscore underscore r is not needed. You just use the relationship name. That's it. I will show you an example, then you will surely understand this. Next, query returning integer. So this relationship query is very important because we will be using a lot of relationship queries in the future when we start writing the code. Next comes the query returning integer. See, like I said, select count from vehicle. You can have a condition there, or you can leave the condition. Here, it will just give you how many records matches that condition or how many records are there in the object. It will give you an integer as return. You can store it in an integer variable. Let me move on to the next slide. So I think as I am going with a theory, it may be a bit difficult to digest. I'm trying to find some time towards the end so that I can run some live examples. So looking at my current speed, I think I will get at least 15 minutes to run through some live examples. Next, when we use this SOQL in Apex code, we will need to use some variables in filters. So the previous examples where I showed all of these are having literal filter values, but here I am going to use a dynamic filter value based on a variable. So here I have a set of string that contains all the mailing states. I want to find all the contacts in this org that belong to the state KS or PA. We can use a condition as mailing state equal to KS or mailing state equal to PA, but the simplest way is putting those in a set or list and use in the with the in clause. So I'm trying to cover different items in different examples. So I have a set of mailing states. I have a simple query again. In the filter condition, you are using that variable, and a very essential element when using a variable in SOQL is prefixing it with a colon. If a colon is not there, Salesforce will try to consider it as a literal, and you will be shown with an error message. So mailing states is a variable. In order to indicate that mailing states is a variable, we are using this colon. For any time you use a variable, make sure you are using a colon. It can be with the equal to filter, it can be with the in operator, it can be with the not equal to, greater than, less than. No matter. Wherever you use a variable in a query, go for a prefix, a colon prefix. Dynamic SOQL. Lots of us programmers might have used this dynamic SOQL because at times a static query won't be enough for our needs. So what we will need as a programmers, we would like to have like to build a query of ourselves and execute it in a dynamic way, not a static query. So here it is all it's same thing here. I have used the same example here. If you see in the previous example, all the queries are within the square brackets. Here I am building a string. You can easily find that it is a string. I build a query string. To execute a query string, I should use this method query of database class. So database.query, a well-formed query string will give you the same return types: an integer, an S object, a list of S object, or a list of S objects. So the thing is, there you are directly executing a query. Here you are dynamically executing a query. That's the difference. Now you may be wondering, because I don't think we are using this notation of square bracket in any other languages. At least I know that. If you want to execute a query, the method is put the query in a pair of square brackets. That is the way you can execute query in Apex. So I showed you an example. Sorry, here it is. Look at select ID, name, contact. This is a query. The for loop first line contains a query, and if you put that query within a pair of square brackets, a query will be executed. There is no other command needed. But when you go to a dynamic query, you should use the database.query method. Here the enclosing a string within a square bracket will not work. That is for static queries. Next comes the aggregate queries. So this is also straightforward from what you have learned from SQL. If you want to group something, go for aggregate query. The difference between normal query and aggregate query is, in the normal query, you will get the S object returned. The S object itself will be returned as a list. For aggregate query, Salesforce Apex has something called an aggregate result object. The returned result will be an aggregate result object, and it has some restrictions to define a better aggregate query. So read through this. Like these are like SOQL queries, but with aggregate functions. This won't return normal S objects. This will return aggregate result object. The allowed aggregate functions: sum, average, or sum AVG, count distinct, min, max. If you are going to group by a particular field, that field cannot be part of this aggregation function. For example, in our example, if I am going to group trips by vehicles, the vehicles cannot be part of any of these functions like count or min or max, whatever it is. But it can be a normal field in the select clause. Similarly, if you are if you are going to use a field in a select clause, that should be grouped. Maybe that will be a bit confusing. I will show you an example here. Look at just the query part. So I am grouping by vehicle. I am querying trip. In a trip, I am querying by grouping by vehicle. For example, I want to find out how many trips a vehicle has gone. There are lots of ways. One of these is this aggregate functions. So I can use the group by field as in the select query. I cannot use any other fields in the select query except the aggregate functions. If I am using two fields to group by, I can use both of those fields in the select clause. And see the aggregate functions. I have used two aggregate functions, count and sum of miles covered. So how much miles a vehicle has covered for this tourister company. So that is basically the miles per each trip, right? So one trip a vehicle goes to one trip for 100 miles and another for 200 miles. The total miles run will be 300. So that is that sum. Again, I have used that relationship. You see, vehicles. My query is in trip, but I am summing up vehicles miles covered. You might have seen a similar field which Nixon might told. I don't know how much of you remember that, especially those who are not from Salesforce platform. There is one type of field that can summarize data from the child objects. That is called a roll-up summary field. If you remember, there is a field called roll-up summary field. But the field roll-up summary field can be used only if master detail relationship is used. That is, the integration should be tight. The parent and child should be tightly coupled. Only then you can use the roll-up summary fields. If there is a roll-up summary field, you can just get this value summarized in a field directly by configuration. But when it is a lookup field, you don't have an option for roll-up summary field. At that time, you will have to update it using programs. And for that, you can use this aggregate query. And I said aggregate query doesn't return normal S objects. They return something called an aggregate result. This aggregate result is a special kind of object. This will have all the fields queried in a kind of map format. You cannot call it exactly a map. Every row returned will be in aggregate result object. You will have to use get method of that aggregate result object to get the value. You cannot directly access the fields. And one more thing I said was alias names. I said with a simple query, we cannot use alias names. With field, we cannot, when a field is so lengthy, we may want to use a field called A, B, or C as alias name. That is not possible with a regular query. But with an aggregate query, you can use alias names. If you see the count aggregate function, I have used an alias name trips. So how many trips that vehicle has, or each of those vehicles has completed. When you get or fetch values from the aggregate result object, if you look at the for loop, the first line says ar.get of vehicle, that uses the field name as it is. There is no alias. We cannot use alias for a normal field. We can use it only for aggregate functions. So that aggregate result object dot get of vehicles. Sorry, the vehicle ID. This will return the vehicle ID. Next, see ar.get of trips. I am using the alias name which I use along with the aggregate functions. For the third one, I didn't use an alias name. If you see for the sum function, I didn't use a alias function, alias name. But you cannot use the field name as it is to get. Aggregate query will name each of the aggregate functions in the format expr0, expr1, expr2. Only if it doesn't have, if it has an alias name, there won't the expr notation will not be used. The alias order will be skipped. If you see, the first aggregate function is count of ID. If I didn't use an alias, expr0 would have been that count, and the sum would have been expr1. So that is the way SOQL aggregate or aggregate result object works. So you have to use the get method and fetch the value from each of the records. The last one for today's topic, before we going into some demo, SOSL, a very powerful search language allowed in or available in Salesforce platform or the Apex. You might, if you have at least used Salesforce for beginning, you might have seen a global search bar at the top. If you enter a string and enter, it will get results from many objects if that matches. It can be from account, it can be from contact, whatever it is, like what Google does. Salesforce has a global search functionality. So they have given that option for developers as well. That is called Salesforce Object Search Language. So unlike SOQL, that queries from particular object and its related objects, this SOSL can be used to search from unrelated objects. What it will do is, it will search in, it won't type all type of field, it won't search all type of fields. It will search text, email, and phone fields. It won't search for number fields at all. And this includes the long text area also. The SOSL will search in the long text areas too. Here there is no need of relationship. The return results can be totally unrelated. Use this only when you are unaware of where the data resides. You want to see where some data resides. You want to see whether if that data resides, but you don't know where it resides. It can be, you have some possibilities. It can be in account, it can be in contact, it can be in some custom objects. You can specify all those custom objects. Of course, there will be some limits, but you can use many custom objects and you can say, hey, search for this string or some strings like this in all these text fields, in all these objects, and give me the results. And this allows a kind of like statement. You might have used the like query where we put percentage, the string name and percentage. Here you can use star. So for example, if you put hello star, it will query all records that has hello, hello one, hello world, hello hi. Any matches will be found and returned in the result. As this SOSL doesn't work on a specific object, we cannot get a list of S objects. Sorry, a specific S objects. So we should get specific S object type and convert according to our needs. So the SOSL should be a bit formatted. We should specify the possible objects, and then we will have to typecast from S object to the object and return a display or use the results. So the very basic, it's SOSL, its syntax is much wider than what we see, but the very basic example I have given you a very basic example. So if you see, it is a list of S object because it searches from multiple S objects. In our example, it searches from vehicle and contact. It searches for the string TN99AD. Anything starts with TN99AD will be returned in all fields. It doesn't specify whether email fields, phone fields, or text fields. It says all fields. When it is all fields, these are text. It will be searched in all the text, email, and phone fields. And we specify what or from which objects we should get the return result. For the time being, I have used if this TS99AD is in any string field of a vehicle object, give me. If it is in any string field of a contact, return me that result. I can add on more objects in the returning. And in parentheses against each of the object, I have given some field names. And in the return result, it will return only these fields. If I am not specifying anything, it will just return the ID of that vehicle. So look through that query once again. Find so that the string to be found in all fields. That all fields, all email fields, all phone fields, and text fields. Returning after searching or search only vehicle and contact fields for this text and return these particular fields from each of the object. Nice, na? I don't think without seeing an example it will be interesting. Let me go through that syntax once again, the remaining code. If you see, I am returning vehicle and contact. After the query, I am typecasting the returned results. So in the returning, I am using vehicle and contact. That order is important. So what in the two-dimensional array, the 0th element will be a list of vehicles and first element will be a list of contacts and so on. So that is what I have done after the query. From the two-dimensional array, I am pulling all the 0th element into a list of vehicles, the first element into a list of contacts. Then I am looping through those lists and printing the data. So I showed you some examples in the demo.
Hey, Subash, are you there? Subash?
Is called a developer console in Salesforce. This developer console is a powerful area. You will be covered with this developer console in detail. For the time going, let me say this mainly for our examples. I can run some simple queries. I can see the values. I can run some basic lines of code. We can see the results. So that is the purpose of this. One of the purposes of developer console. So let me first execute a query. So this should be. Let's start with a very simple query here.
Subash, yeah, quick question. Can you show how to go to the SOQL editor? So maybe you can show the developer console launching option too. Just a quick, right? So.
Sorry, I missed that point. So this is your Salesforce screen. Look at this, click this settings button, and you will have this option called developer console. Thank you, Nixon, for reminding me that.
No problem.
So this is a powerful area where you can play around. So this at the bottom you can see this query editor. Let me run some simple queries here. Select ID, name, parent office from vehicle. So those who are not yet into Salesforce, those who are coming into Salesforce for the first time, or maybe even admins might have seen these names. As this is a custom object, vehicle is a custom object, that is why I have this __C. This ID and name are standard fields. So this don't have that __C, but this parent office is a custom field. So that should have that __C notation at the end. I have this execute button that will show me all the results. So any number of fields you can add on with this query. This is a simple one object query. If you see, this is the ID which we were saying about, the 15 or 18 digit ID. Normally when query returns, it will return all the 18 digits. This particular ID is the ID of that vehicle. This is the name field. In the name field, I have stored the registration number of the vehicle. And this parent office. Do you wonder why it shows an ID there? Because it is a relationship field. This parent office is a relationship to account. So in the back end, what will be stored is the ID of the parent record, not the name or any other fields. Now let us extend this a little bit to see the parent office also. And rightly you can see the last two rows does not have a parent office. That means it is not attached to a parent office yet. And here comes the relationship query to the parent. See. I want to see the parent office's name too. And one more thing I am adding. Billing city of the parent office. That's it. So in the developer console, when you see this query, there will be some limitations because you see some of them are null. And if the relationship goes beyond 2 levels, it won't display the records here. For that, we will have to use the code and see. or we can use external tools to view those records. But for the time being, for our purpose, this is enough. If you see, this is the parent office, Chester Springs, PA. Looks like a location name, but this is a name I have given to the office. And this is the ID of the parent office. I believe this will give you an understanding of how we store the ID in the backend. So this is a parent relationship. We have used the parent relation records here. Let me add a condition here where no billing city, no account has billing city as PA. That is the meaning. So let me move on to contact. I believe everyone can see the screen and it is clear. Again, no one has PA as the mailing address. So these are the filters actually. Sorry, I think I made a mistake. Yeah. Now I have, sorry, I used it as mailing address, which is an object, but it's mailing state actually. So if you see there is one contact from PA, if I add the filter there, that one record will be returned. So this is a very basic SOQL. So let's go into some coded solutions from here, from what we have, from what I have conducted in the session. To execute a code, go to this debug menu, open execute window. This doesn't need any specific class structure. It will just execute very simple statements. So let me go from reverse, as I have already stored this dynamic query. Maybe let me come a bit later for this. We saw about lists, sets, and maps, right? So let me start with a simple list. I have a list initialized. I'm using the for loop for that, and I iterate. Hope you can remember this syntax which I used. Basically, I'm just printing that list items. So you can see here, Paula and Harry. Next, this is one constructor. Let me go for another constructor now. Do you know? Do you understand what it is? Basically, you are using, you are creating a list using elements of another list. So this names is a list. More names is a new list which I have built using existing list. So if I print this, both will return me the same result. Paula Hari. So from two lists I have printed. So they are set is very similar to this. I think it's. I don't think we need to go into set. Let it be. Let me go with a map now. How much time we have, Nixon? 10 minutes.
Yep. Hope you
Okay.
are on.
Then I think let's instead of going to map, I will execute some SOQL queries using the child relationship. That would be better. So this is another type of constructor where you are building a list using the results of an SOQL query. So if you see, this one is a query. As this is in square bracket, this will be executed, and you will it will return the results from the vehicles that will be initialized with the vehicle record. I think I got disconnected. Can you hear me? So I'm executing this query. I have a query built. You can see this is a query. I'm initializing this list with the query results, and I am iterating through the list to display the results. So you can see the vehicle records, the name and parent office of the vehicle records. So this is what I basically executed in the query editor. Let me go one step further to show the child records. If you see, this is the child for each of the vehicles. So how many trips are assigned for the vehicles? We are going to print it. Each vehicle have its own children, so that will be another list of trips. So that is this is called the child relationship, the trips __ R. Just a separator. So at the moment, each vehicle, or at least only 3 vehicles, have trips. So those trip details are displayed in the inner query. For each of the vehicle, these are the trips. Let me try to add one more trip to one more vehicle. Or 4 actually. Oh God. So one vehicle, this NYC 7898 has 2 trips now. So let me execute that code again. Oh gosh. Sorry about that. I will have to rewrite that code again. But let me go with another one example, that is the SOSL. So let me go with this. I'm sorry about that.
It happens, Subash.
Yeah. So this is the source, the final subject, Salesforce object search language, which I told you. So I am trying to find this word TN99AD from vehicle objects and the contact objects. So in any of the text fields, if they are present, they will be displayed, and I am getting them into separate vehicles and contacts list. I am printing them. So let's go through. So this particular word is found in 2 vehicles and 2 contact records. If you see, it is TN99AD1145, TN99AD8734. We didn't query for a particular object, but a set of objects. And in the contact record, it is in some fields. So this driver is Dominic and John. It is in their description. I put these values in their description, and that brought us these records as a result. So this is the power of SOSL. This is faster, though it is searching for too many records. It is faster, and we should, of course, we should try to optimize the SOSL as much as possible. So think with this we can end today's session. Again, thank you so much for being part of my first webinar. I don't know how much boring I was. Thank you again. Shekhar?
Thanks, Subash. Thanks for your great presentation. And yeah, it is a great eye opener for people coming from other technologies and people whom like starting career like me as an admin or BA. So yeah, this is really helpful. And guys, by considering time, we couldn't answer or we couldn't have that Q&A in the end of the session, but we will consolidate all the questions and post FAQ document as well as the session recording, and everyone will get notified on